Thank you, Gil.
Good evening.
That hurt.
Good evening.
Welcome to our facilities, disposition and site remediation committee meeting. My name is Kathy Patterson. I'm the vice chair of the facilities, disposition and site remediation committee meeting. We're welcoming everyone here, and we hope that you've come to participate and to hear and to give all of your insights and to listen and to learn. Now, I'm sorry, I'm new at this.
You can just say your name and you can just tell everyone.
I'm sorry. Kind of new here doing this, so forgive me.
You're doing fine.
You're doing
Thank
fine.
you.
Take your time. It's informal.
Well, good, because I'm very informal right now.
We're all friends.
So
We're all
instead of me
friends.
introducing everybody that's here, so I'm going to ask each one around the table to introduce yourself. And anyone else that is here is welcome to come and join us at the table if you were so inclined to do so. And I'm just asking that anyone, if you do introduce yourself and as you are talking, anytime that you have any comments or any statements that you will make, that if anyone is around the table, that you do use a microphone, and if you are going to make any comments, that you come to the microphone and make your comments. So we're going to ask those that are around the table to introduce themselves at this time, starting on my right, and then we'll go around and we'll end up.
That would be right.
My other left, my other right, my left.
We used to call that the military left. I'm Michael McLance, Department of Energy, the designated deputy federal official for the CAB.
I'm Nina Spinelli with the CAB.
I'm Joyce Underwood with the CAB.
That microphone's not working.
I'm Joyce Underwood with the CAB.
I like her.
I knew you'd get along.
Yes, she is.
Let's try that microphone again.
Testing. Oh, yeah, that's a whole lot better.
Oh, I was waiting for Joyce to introduce herself.
Gil Allensworth, Cab. Earl Shepherd, Cab.
Robert Smith, cab. Dan Kaminsky, cab. And I am on this committee. My name's not on it. That was my fault. I'll admit that. That was me.
Poor Kathy.
I forgot to add his. Oh, yeah, then there's that. James Tanner with CAB Support, and I'd like to remind all of our conference call attendees to please mute your phone when not speaking. Thank you.
Press 2.
Don't press 2. Don't listen to Gil.
Bobby Williams, CAB.
They,
Oh, she's in a car.
Deidre Lloyd with EPA.
Bobby.
Bobby, she's in the car driving.
Oh.
Anyone else? Well, thank you. I do want to stress to everyone that the meetings are being recorded live, and to please state your name and affiliation before speaking, and speak loudly and clearly, and also be warned that mics pick up idle chatter. So please make sure that you're not talking when someone else is talking. I do want to let you know we're going to keep the agenda topics during the meeting, try to keep everything on what we're discussing. Also, just know, public, that there will be a public comment period where other comments can be heard, and anyone wishing to answer questions or address the CAB must come up to the microphone to speak, and this will ensure the online attendees can hear the comments or questions. And there is no public comment sign-up sheet. The Facilities Disposition and Site Remediation Committee has no draft recommendation to discuss tonight. Our committee members are Don Gillis, Chair, Kathy Patterson, Vice Chair, Eric Crossan, William Roden, Robert Smith, Nina Spinelli, Earl Shepherd, Ed Sturkin, and Louis Walters, and then there's somebody left over here. Joyce Underwood, and
Poor Dan.
and Dan Kaminsky. Thank you. Okay. We will now hear from our point of contact status update, Avery Hammett from DOE.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you for the introduction. I'm Avery Hammett with DOE. I am the DOE liaison to the FDSR committee. So I will give you an update on the D area ash project for something new and different. Ash excavation and consolidation is continuing at the 488-1D coal ash basin in preparation for the geosynthetic cover. The 489D coal pile runoff basin is scheduled for completion this month, and that will make 3 out of 4 basins in the project closed. I always like to let y'all know when there are any environmental bulletins issued. So this is a permit modification on the transuranic waste pads, and it's not technically under our committee, but it is a document that's out for public comment, and there will be a public meeting on June 21st at 3:30 at the Aiken County Library. So I have a few copies of it if anybody would like one. You all may have already gotten it if you subscribe to the environmental bulletins, but so I just brought that just in case. And then the final update is at the May meeting, we told you all about a possible exceedance that we had received from our laboratory that processes our samples for one of our outfalls. And so we have tracked that down and investigated the site and actually heard back from the lab that it was a laboratory error. So that has been reported to DHEC, and so that issue is closed. But I just wanted to let you all know because we did tell you about that at the May meeting. So that's all I have. Does anybody have any questions? Okay, thanks.
Well, thank you, Avery, for the update. Now we will have the committee discussion on the community involvement plan. Any discussions?
James, do you want to facilitate?
Sure, I'd be happy to.
Thank you.
So what worked really well last week when Gil was doing this with the Waste Management Committee was talking a little bit about what you learned from the presentation and any comments that you may have had. Brian is here if you have any remaining questions and follow-up about that presentation. And Nina's going to hand out copies to everybody just so that you can have it.
That is a good chair right there.
I know.
She is. She's really nice.
You didn't say you're a good chair, you said you're nice.
They're synonymous.
Joyce respects you to understand everything and ask lots of questions. And all the recommendation 338, we expect you to know what that is. And the CRP.
Why did I have to look for myself?
There.
Thank you. Kathy was super nice to give me one. So I guess the last bulletin, the last PowerPoint is probably the most pertinent for us. The DOE is interested in any suggestions you have regarding any aspect of the next revisions of the CIP. So do y'all have any thoughts?
I have a question. Have we rated or scored the current CIP to see if it met its goals and objectives?
This would be a Brian Hennessy question.
Hey, Brian Hennessy, Department of Energy. The question was, have we rated or scored the current CIP on the extent to which it met its goals and objectives? Has who rated or scored it?
Anyone?
Well, it was approved by the state and EPA.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, that was when it was originally published, correct?
Yeah, when we submitted it for their approval, they
But did anyone deem its effectiveness over time that it worked, didn't work?
Oh, so you're asking about our community involvement program, not our community involvement plan, really. How effective is our community involvement?
Yeah. I mean, I'm assuming
I'm not the person to answer that.
Okay, so the program followed the plan, correct?
Yes.
So did anyone determine whether the program was successful based on that plan? Was there any input suggesting certain aspects of the plan were ineffective or not needed?
So Dewey and Michael is this mic on? Yeah,
Yeah.
there we go. Dewey and Michael Michelinas. And Brian, I'm going to ask if you'll revise and extend my remarks a little bit. You and I had a discussion today that walked me through a little bit about how the community involvement plan, the development of the plan, and then the execution of the plan to go solicit information. The way Brian explained it to me today, and I think this is getting to your question, is when you use this plan and you solicit the information, it's really soliciting two things from the public. First of all, what are you interested in, and how would you like to be consulted? And then that information is taken in and it's used to put together a community involvement program, and it also goes in to shape the formulation of the cleanup program itself. So by virtue of the fact that we've got something that was approved by EPA and DHEC, we've got a program that plan has been effective in that we were able to get a program scored, if you will, or accepted by the two regulators. And the public seemed to have been satisfied with the process because we didn't get negative feedback at the time frame while we were doing it. The reason we're going after the information now is it's been, 15 or 25 years, you said, since we originally put the plan together in the 90s. And given David's recommendation, the only thing in the regulations and the guides is to go review the plan and update the plan every 3 years or as appropriate, whichever happens sooner. In this case, with a long program like that, read that every 3 years. It doesn't require a complete regathering of the information, but since it's been such a long time and David refocused our attention on it, we thought, we need to go out and repulse the community and see what the community's thinking. Are we still on the right track? Because expectations change, the public changes, and it's time to re-baseline and rescore kind of what we did in the past. It seemed to have worked in the first because we got a successful plan, so that's the program we're following. Did I kind of summarize what you shared with me this morning correctly?
Yes, all that is true. Actually, the last update of the plan, which was in 2011, or in the last update in 2011, we stated that we were going to gather new public concerns in the next revision. So it wasn't, strictly speaking, the recommendation that put us on that track.
Thank you for
We
that.
recognized that it was time to do that anyway. Okay? And
Thank you for the clarification.
I also don't want anyone to think that the community involvement plan is a script for our community involvement. It doesn't follow it. You use the term follow. No, our community involvement program is quite elaborate, and there's a lot of planning, preparation, and work, not only on the DOE side, but in our contractors' public affairs organization. And there are meetings and needs for meetings and opportunities for public interaction that the plan didn't anticipate, doesn't foresee. It does contain, for one thing, our requirements for public involvement. So it's sort of a guide to the things we have to do, okay? It does not lay out a timeline or a plan in the pure sense for everything that we intend to do or everything that will eventually happen. Right. A lot of stuff comes up because of emergent issues. One thing leads to another. One meeting leads to the need for another meeting. So if we haven't gotten too far off the rails here.
This is Deidre Lloyd with EPA. I'd like to have some input.
Please.
Thank you. I think that the community involvement plan for SRS is a fairly robust plan. We've also, EPA and South Carolina DHEC are involved in different community meetings outside of the CAB, come as a CAB, and then we also have meetings outside of the site in different counties throughout that surround the site. And then we're actually now in the middle of doing a technical needs assessment. EPA is working with DOE and a lot of different stakeholders, and the Shell Belt community, we're going out into that community, and there was a need that was brought to the site's attention, and so we're addressing that. So I think it is a very robust and plan that meets needs as they arise, as Brian and Michael have both alluded to.
Okay. Brian, does the community involvement plan include the new Shell Bluff piece that y'all are working on, or is that separate?
No, there is no new community involvement plan yet. It's not going to be issued until late in FY18. So I'm sure that by that time there will be some acknowledgement of that ongoing outreach in the next revision. Because it is a significant 2 or 3 year activity.
Kathy Patterson.
In addition, as the SRS and EPA, this is kind of a special case usually, but Brian's right, they probably should wrap it into their plan. But this is a special need, and that's a need that came up, and it was identified, and so it's being addressed. So that's what I mean, is it's a fairly robust plan, and then it meets needs as they arise.
Kathy Patterson.
Does that answer your question?
Okay.
It does. Thank
Yes.
you. Poor Kathy.
Go ahead,
Wait,
Kathy.
I'm gonna wait. Okay. Kathy Patterson, CAB. Since we are to be discussing this, I did look at the last plan that they had, the 2011, and I printed it out, and since we're going to discuss, it says that the objectives of the program are, and we can go through the objectives that are here and see if we feel that there is any discussion on the objectives that they have, or we feel like it's the plan is headed in that direction, or it's not, or we can think of something different that can be done. The first thing it listed, it said that one of the objectives is to keep the public well informed of ongoing and planned activities. And so I can put to the board or put to the public, do you feel that you're being well informed of ongoing and planned activities? So I guess silence gives consent.
I think the emails that we get, especially on the CAB, the SRS daily updates, I think are really thorough.
I think that's a great question, but I think it's kind of fair for us to, I think it's unfair for us to answer.
I know.
Because
We are the
we're
key.
interested, and we get daily updated emails. And how many people read those daily updated emails? I mean,
I wouldn't know how many people read them. I know how many people I send them to.
but yeah, I think that's a tough question for us to add, in my opinion. It's tough for me to answer because you care, I care, you care. We all care because this is what we're here. I do know, when I'm out in the community, I get people, and I don't know the answer, but people are frustrated because they're like, we don't know what's going on out there, and I'm like, well, come to CAB meetings, you'll find out. But how do we? I remember having a conversation with Jim Giusti. It was about 2 years ago. We had a conversation, and Jim was like, we've been battling this for a decade, trying to get people involved.
It's an age-old question with public participation.
Joyce Underwood, CAB, and I have a question about this. So obviously it says you want to keep the public informed. Public is a lot of people. Is there any way that you are currently or plan to in the future target certain populations in order to better disseminate information? Because you can just throw it out there to the public, like the news things. They might read it, they might not, but based on like demographics, age, other things, would that be a better way to disseminate the information, or is that already happening and I just don't know because this is my first meeting?
It's already happening because I live in Beaufort, so I drive up 2.5, almost 3 hours, so it just happens. And other people live everywhere. So.
Well, right, but what I'm saying, like, not necessarily populations of cities, but like senior citizens populations, education populations, demographically done, so that people who might not already take an interest might have a reason to take interest because it applies to them in their demographics. Does that make sense? Is that happening? Will it happen? Can it happen? Is it a good idea? Is it a bad idea?
So
I guess,
let me-
are you saying you want it on Twitter, or I think it's in the news. I see it in the newspaper. I think locally, at least, there's a very good job of getting information out there. As far as getting out to different demographic, I see that as almost an unlimited task because the demographic is continually changing. And if you're interested, and you'll seek out the information. I think it's there if you want it. It's on the internet. It's in the papers. It's everywhere else. If you want it, it's there. If you expect somebody to open your head and spoon feed it to you, I don't think it's going to happen.
So, Michael McElance, Department of Energy. Let me try and answer your question this way because I think that's a good question. And it can be pretty confusing, and I have a master's in environmental engineering, and I studied this stuff in grad school, and these regulatory things can sometimes twist your head around. We involve the public in the cleanup decisions through the community involvement program. This brings the community in a two-way discussion with various decisions that the department makes under other regulatory and environmental regulations. The community involvement plan is a plan that we revisit periodically to go look at how do we get the public involved in that program. It inputs into the program. When I said that the plan's outcomes are kind of two questions, and this is my terms, not necessarily what's in the large document. It asks and solicits as we implement the plan. Brian's in the formulation of the plan stage right now. When we actually formulate the plan and go implement it next fiscal year, we're going to ask the public, well, what are you concerned about? And the other thing we're going to ask is, and how do you want to be involved? That could be Twitter and Facebook. The feedback that we get from the community when we do the interviews, the meetings, and there's a variety of ways to go get this input. When we get that input, if there's social media is a brand new thing compared to 1991 when we did the original surveys. I would be amazed if there wasn't some discussion of that, and when the results of what we learn get summarized into the new plan, and that's what feeds the community involvement program. So yes, the answer to your question is we will be looking at those kinds of things, but we're going to have the public tell us, how do you want to be involved? What kinds of way? Maybe it's all by television, by newspaper, by Twitter, by what are the ways that the public views as being important? That will help us formulate what kind of adjustments we need to make to our community involvement program as we make these regulatory decisions on how we're going to clean up the site. Does that answer your question and help you understand? Or am I off
Yes, but I have
target?
a follow-up question. Do I have to say my name again?
Sure, Michael.
Oh, Joyce Underwood, CAB. How do you solicit that input?
Well, that's what the plan itself will describe.
The plan will describe how you
The
solicit the
update-
input for creating the program.
Well, we already have a program for adjusting the program. We have a community involvement program. The
Okay.
plan that we put together is a plan of how we're going to go off and get more current information on what the public's desires are for inputting to that and what their current concerns are. And then that will be sent and read and understood by the folks who implement the community involvement program so that they can change their ways of communicating with the public when we're making the cleanup decisions. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Glad I could help.
And Kathy Patterson, CAB, and I just want to reiterate that I know this is informal, but as we stated before, that when you do make a comment, if you would state your name so that those that are watching and those that are listening can know who's talking. Also, another discussion, the other objective of, is there any more comments on the public being well informed of ongoing and planned activities?
And Michael Michaelis, DOE, Kathy, I'm sorry to interrupt one more time. And if the EPA or Brian wants to revise or expand my remarks just because the assistant manager spoke, doesn't mean that's the last word. I invite any clarifications that anybody wants to make. Hearing none.
Another topic, they said the program objective is to encourage and enable the public to get involved. I think we've kind of hit on that already about how they would like to get them involved and going and asking, going out and soliciting, and as Joyce had asked, how would they do that? And that's, the plan was to state that. Any other discussion on encourage, or anyone have any other discussion on how to encourage and enable the public to get involved?
Fly a drone.
But I know you didn't say that. I see why he didn't announce his name.
That was Earl Shepard,
Oh, thank you.
Assistant Chair of the Cab. I pull back my vote.
Dan?
Yeah, Dan Kaminsky, Cab. Just some input. Many websites that people visit for informational purposes have, if you care to take a survey at the end of your viewing to get their input, that might be a possibility of an opportunity to continually solicit feedback other than such a long period between these formal surveys. So the last formal survey was 1991, correct?
Yes.
So, I mean, just kind of to help grow with the times, even your social media sites could always offer up that asterisk. If there's another form of communication you'd like to see this formatted in, let us know. I mean, it may be an app. I don't know. I mean, I've seen that where you can stay in constant contact even with like resorts you've been to. You get an app and it'll constantly give you the pertinent. There's an app for that. Exactly. So to be honest with you, I don't know how effective all the social media is on topics like this because I see it every day in my neighbor's eyes when I talk about CAB. It's if they were truly, truly interested, they'd be knocking on my door because they know I'm coming here, or they'd be joining me for the meeting, or they'd be soliciting some sort of feedback, or actually visiting the website. So I think you're kind of stuck with, for lack of a better word, public apathy to take the initial step. And like Bob said, we can't spoon feed their brains with the information. So
The Nina Spinelli Cab, the county of Aiken actually just finished up their listening sessions this week. They had them at different communities across Aiken to get their feel for the Renaissance Plan and other things that are happening in the county. The county was doing it because like the county sponsored it and then they went to the different cities. And I don't know the exact numbers offhand, but from what I heard, it was less than I think 5 or 10 people that came to these, and it was very well advertised. They came in people's water bills. It was in the newspapers, on the website. It was, I think, robocalled. I'm not 100% sure on that, but they had very high hopes for these listening sessions, and the numbers were not high.
You said the Renaissance Plan for the city. I mean, you can read about the Renaissance Plan in the Letters Editor every single day. Every single day. And you have a meeting, 10 people show up. Mm-hmm. We just had the issue with Canadian fuel, and we had a response on it. You could read about Letters to the Editor and about how horrible it was and how SRS is going to melt down. And we found out how well it was handled. So, but Dan, you were talking about social media. I agree with you, but I doubt Joyce does. Because I bet you, I'm just picking on you because you appear to be young, so.
Please, go on.
But Joyce and Nina, I mean, they're sitting over here at a break talking about all this different stuff they're doing on Facebook, and somehow they got me involved, and I don't know what they're doing. But a lot of information is disseminated that way by people that I wouldn't anticipate. So I think it's good that we use it, but it's apathy. I agree with that.
Dan Kaminsky Cab, I don't appreciate your backward way of saying I'm old.
I take that back. You're old. Forward.
Thank you. I like the direct approach. None of that.
He's a puppy.
Yeah, I agree that there is a difference in communication, likes and dislikes. But I can only say that people who are actively engaging, they're either engaging themselves or they're not. And that's why if the plan and the CPI would also, CIP would include some measurables like how many hits to the site, how many hits to this Twitter account, how many hits to Facebook, things of that nature. You can see the trends as to whether it's the same people, if it's unique hits, if it's repeat visits, if it's just me looking at the training material again, whatever, again. And whatever that case is, those are good metrics to know about and understand, because if the trend is the Gen Xers or the millennials or whatever the latest generation is called these days, if they're not tuning into that, what are they tuning in and how do we reach them? I mean, I see from my personal private view, I see the CAB outreach with the school programs as probably being the most future impactful possibility out there, because you're more or less raising the next generation to understand and care about what's going on out here.
So Michael McAlance, DOE, and I may get Brian and others to cringe because I'm going to take some poetic license and simplify some of this. Let's call the community involvement plans the planners, as opposed to the program people who are implementing the cleanup program and the community involvement program. Okay, so the planners are going to go out there and ask, how do you want to be involved? And they're going to probably publish in, just like in 91, the survey results of 59% wanted newspapers and 29% wanted this, and they'll report out, here's what the public told us to go do. The program people they're going to say, okay, there's more interest in social media. Let's try this or this or this. And the program people will ask those very questions, just like James does when it comes to implementing the CAB program. We'll look at, well, how many times has this been hit? How many hits have we got on the streaming versus the YouTube upload? And they'll be looking at the different ways of communicating to see the effectiveness will be evaluated by the community involvement program people. The planners are just going out there, and that's what that's what the CAB's recommendation was on, is to go out there and say, what does the public want? How does the public want to be involved? What are you concerned about? And it'll take all that information and feed it into the program people, and the program people will evaluate the effectiveness as they make tweaks to how they involve the community. Does that help a little bit? I think, yes, we'll be doing that, but it won't be under the plan. It'll be under program execution.
Susan Clisby, DOE External Affairs, mainly for Joyce's benefit since she's new. Part of what we're talking about here is very formal, this community involvement that has to do specifically with cleanup. And also we were sort of mixing in the CAB website, but just so you know, we also do have a robust communication program overall, for the site and for EM in general, which is how we also reach out, and with our contractors. So we have a great deal of outreach. Just because I think you might have been asking a little bit about, generic outreach as opposed to specifically just this community involvement plan. So.
Joyce Underwood, CAB. I'd like to clarify what I said about populations, because I don't think I was understood. Obviously, the way the world is going, social media is like a non-issue because that's what's going to happen. My background is primarily in senior advocacy and education, so what I'm basically asking is, how are you addressing your baby boomers and your children? And is that going to be part of this? So
That's why you're here.
I don't think she's a baby boomer yet.
No, she goes, why are you?
But
no, I didn't say why. I said, like, how are we doing this? Like, that was what my original question was towards, just to clarify.
So Michael McAlance, Department of Energy, when we did this program and solicited the information originally in 1991, we and I don't know the process that was used to select who would be interviewed and the meeting locations, etc. But we're going to follow the same thing, and that did ensure that we had a diverse public opinion, both from in context of gender, race, age group, and anything else that we want a diverse input from the community. And it worked well in 91, and we're going to do the same thing in 2018 the way we did in 1991.
I don't want to stay too long on this because I know we have other objectives to get to. But I was thinking about what Dan said, and I'm wondering almost if when they do revise the plan, if when we are doing the CAB outreach tours, if that would be a possibility for people who are going on that tour, if they could be given the survey, either, you know, as a follow-up, maybe when Kristen's doing her debriefing, or if there's a way to integrate it, because I think you're right. I mean, that is the population. I mean, just honestly, most of the people that go to the tour are probably 50 and older. I'm sure Kristen would have those numbers better than anyone, but I think they are older, and they obviously are an interested group of people because they're showing up. And maybe there would be a way to weed out the ones that are obviously out of state visiting as like a museum tour versus the ones that live in the local community. It's maybe just a thought.
So Michael McLean, DOE, as you were talking, I saw Brian take his pen out and scribble down a note. I think your comment and your thought was well taken, and he's, since we're writing the plan now, I think your point was just incorporated for consideration.
Brian Hennessy, DOE. Nina, just to be sure I understand, are you talking about tours of the Savannah River site?
Yes, those community outreach tours that happen. Are they once a month, Kristen? Twice a month. Twice a month.
We do conduct surveys after each tour.
Okay, well, we could actually make sure that the surveys specifically gather the kind of information we're looking for.
See?
But yeah, they did. Well, because I mean they're there. It's a long drive to get out to the site. It's a lengthy process to get through the badging. So I would imagine those would be the people whose input you would want.
It's not as lengthy as you think it is.
It's lengthy for me.
Twice.
Moving forward.
Sorry, inside joke, y'all.
Robert Smith with the CAB. Well, I think that in fact is the point. If they are interested enough to take the tour and to drive out there, they're interested enough to find out what they need to know and how to communicate that to get the information. If they will take that survey, then that does in fact provide the information. So I think in a sort of circular way we've come around to the same point, is that if people are interested enough to know and to understand what's going on out there, they'll seek it out. You can't put ideas and initiative in somebody's head. They have to take that initiative themselves, and I think they're doing a good job at that.
Earl's hungry.
We really get our hands and start banging on
No,
the
I mean, 'cause Earl Shepherd Cab, I mean, that's basically what I said earlier. With me coming from Buford, I got interested because I'm an end user of the Savannah River, which gets dumped in from the Savannah River site and everything else on down. So, I mean, I'm interested in what's going on, and so are other people in Beaufort County. I mean, there's 210,000 of us that use that water, so it's just like Robert said, if you want to know, you're going to figure it out and you'll get to it. And by far, I'm not the person that lived the farthest. I mean, you got Bob Dorr, Cleveland Lattimore lived in Savannah. Jim Lyons lived in Savannah. I mean, so you just got to want to do it.
Mr. Google's pretty intelligent.
There you go.
I live like 4 miles from here.
Okay, we'll bring it back.
Thank you.
This next objective, I'm going to combine these because they're kind of close together. It says, listen carefully to what the public is saying and identify and deal responsibly with public concerns. And it just seemed like all three of these together, and then change plan actions where public comments or concerns have merit. So if they're listening to what the public is saying, then they will identify and deal responsibly with the concerns, public concerns, and then if there's any concerns, then they will change what they're doing based on what the public comments are. if they have merit, because we realize that just because a public has a concern, it may not warrant a merit to change the plan because of what they are saying. So we always have to be mindful of that. Any comments, any discussion on those?
Nina, that sounds kind of like those info pods that SRS tried a few years ago.
Thinking that, Nina Spinelli Cab, last year and the year before we had info pods at Aiken Tech that were broken up into segments where people from the site came and spoke about different topics. And from what I remember, they were really well attended. They did really well. Even the one at Beaufort at the high school, I think, did well. So maybe that could be something to add to the plan, is having those breakout information pods, but moving them more from Aiken and maybe having them across the CSRA and other major cities. Any thoughts on that? Good. We have the info pods, and I think for us, for the cab, there's a really good response. One of the recommendations that we had last year, the year before, was to look at spreading out our meetings across the CSRA more. And if you look at our meeting schedule this year, it's a lot more robust than it was the year before. So I think we have a good example of putting it out there, and it can work.
The Aiken
Name.
Gil Allensworth Cab. Since Nina, you started doing that, there's been a change in leadership at Aiken Tech, and I know the new president of Aiken Tech is very interested in helping people receive the skills necessary to come work on the site. So if there's a lot of different things and it seems to me that the best, going to what Earl and Bob are saying, if you tie it to jobs and tie it to opportunities, people get a little more interested.
They do, and it's interesting because the Department of Labor, Spinelli Cab, has a federal grant, and South Carolina was one of the recipients of that for the kids that complete Youth Challenge at Fort Jackson. They can actually come here and live at Camp Long for post-Jackson, and they pay for them to go to Aiken Tech. And one of the programs that they've been really encouraging the kids to look at is that partnership, the one with SRS, the certification. So if the kids are interested in it and they go through that Department of Labor grant, it's free for them. So maybe getting that publicized a little bit more. It's hard to tell 17-year-olds that, but
Well, you can only tell them.
I'll tell you, the new president of Aiken Tech's impressive. He's really pushing.
yeah.
That's good to hear. Any other discussion around the table? The last objective that was stated was to explain to citizens how DOE considered their comments, what DOE plans to do, and why DOE reached its decision. Any discussion or comments on that? I think that when we look at the plan and when we hear the questions and when we hear the objectives, we are already in our mindset see that and hear that when we're coming to our meetings, when we're coming to the full board meetings, we're hearing these things. So we're seeing that in our eyes and that these things are being done. So I hope that there are some comments or those that may be listening or those that may listen to it later will, if they disagree with anything that is said and if they have any comments regarding what the objectives are for the plan, and if you don't see that these things are being done, that they will make comments. Are there any discussions on that? If not, are there any public comments? No public comments? Well, if there are no public comments,
Happy birthday, Kathy.